Good evening and welcome. On her fourth announcement to spell out details of the Eco Mega Booster, the Finance Minister focused instead on infrastructure development in the country. Some of the ideas spelled out in defence and aviation were progressive, but clearly had nothing to do with the plight of millions in the country economically stifled because of the COVID pandemic.
We shall notify a list of weapons and platforms which shall be not allowed for import, but we shall have them bought from India. So the import of this listed set of equipments shall not be allowed. They shall be banned. And every year this list will be increased because more capacities which come to be recognized, which meet the standards, which meet the defense standards, will be obtained from India. Indigenization of some imported spares will also be given priority. So this is going to be something with which the defense can make sure that their import bill can come down. This is done in consultation with the Department of Military Affairs, that FDI limits are being raised from 49% to 74%. Of course, it will have the security clearances and everything else, as always. And then we'll also have a mechanism established so that time-bound defense procurement processes happen. Civil aviation is up for a big leap. So the airspace availability through which the flying time is influenced is going to be better. 6 more airports are for auction, and the Airports Authority of India shall do it on public-private basis, PPP basis. The third in this, because it's all pertain to civil aviation, is making India an MRO hub. This was mentioned also in the budget. Maintenance, repair and overhaul of aircrafts is a big business. Most of the Indian aircrafts themselves go abroad to do their repair works, spend on parts there, and also come back for after the overhaul to India.
All right, well, we're going to get our panelists in just a few moments from now, but just to mention that the points which were said by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman today didn't have very much to do with migrants, or didn't have very much to do with the economic state of millions across the country, across sectors, across economic lines. They focused instead on infrastructure building. Some of the ideas were fairly progressive in the areas of defense, in the areas of aviation as well. But these are progressive schemes which perhaps pertain to a long-term idea of how India and its economy can progress. Was there anything really there for those who are suffering as a result of the economic consequences of COVID? It's unclear right now. Well, joining us is Air Chief Marshal Fali Major, the former Chief of Air Staff of the Indian Air Force. Air Chief Marshal, thank you very much for being with us. Is it a good idea for the government to suggest that there now needs to be a ban on the import of certain defense items because we've reached a certain level where we can build these ourselves in India?
Vishnu, most certainly, why not? If we have the capability of, designing, manufacturing certain defense products, which we spend millions in importing from outside, I think it's a tremendous idea to make sure that these are bought within the country and not imported. I don't find anything wrong with it.
And sir, 74% is the FDI cap. It's been raised to that. Is this essentially an effort at bringing in good foreign technology, foreign partners, and then building over here in India?
Why not? Absolutely. Because if you were to look at any military platform or equipment or a weapon system, there is no country in the world which manufactures every single component of it. And I would go a step further in this initiative and say that whatever is manufactured in India by these people and is not required by us but can be exported elsewhere will still benefit us both in our skill levels and job employment in many other aspects.
Okay. We're also joined by Anil Swarup, the former Secretary, Ministry of Coal in the Government of India. That's because a lot of very important announcements on the coal sector as well. Good evening, Mr. Swarup. Of an amount of 50,000 crore rupees to help evacuate coal from the pit mines to places where it would be required, and also privatization of the coal sector itself. Let's focus on the privatization effort first. How would that benefit India?
You know, the announcements made today are very encouraging, but I doubt whether there is anything new in it. The commercialization of coal blocks had happened about a year ago, and that was the right step forward. I hope that consequent to this announcement, some concrete steps will be taken on the ground to take it forward. However, in doing that, the government will have to be very careful about making things easy for those that get these blocks. You would recall that way back in 2014,
yes,
a number of coal blocks were auctioned. Of course, they were limited in nature, not commercial in nature, but the problems remain the same. There are three critical factors in operating a coal mine. First is land acquisition, second is environment and forest clearance, and third is evacuation of coal. All these three aspects will have to be considered if commercial coal mining has to succeed. And one way forward is the reinvigorating of project monitoring group. At that group, fast-track clearances. You know, one of the biggest debilitating factor is the delay in clearances of various things that have to happen, especially environment and forest clearances, as is the case with land acquisition. So, whereas the announcement is very good, I think a lot of effort has to go into creating an environment where the investor or the person who gets allotted these mines feel comfortable in going ahead and doing what he has to do.
Mr. Swarup, you actually raised the key word, environment. If we are encouraging the coal sector to open up even further and therefore increase our reliance on coal, and even though she was looking at ways to not have large plants belching coal, but to use the gasification of coal, that also comes with its concerns in terms of emissions. So is this essentially a one step forward because we have no choice, but another big step back in terms of our environment?
No, not at all. Look at the facts. Facts are that India is importing a lot of coal. In any case, coal is getting consumed. The question is whether we continue to import coal or produce our own coal. In fact, if you look at it technically, getting coal from long distance and importing it to India is much worse for environment than mining coal in India. If we were to reduce coal consumption, then it's a different matter. But we can't at this point in time. We do require coal, and we are importing huge amount of coal from Indonesia and other countries. So instead of importing coal, if we start producing coal within the country, it will be environmentally beneficial. Secondly, whatever measures that you have to take to protect the environment while mining coal, within the country you have control over them. For your information, for every hectare of coal that is mined, the company is mandated to forest 2.5 hectares of land. Now this you can actually monitor within the country. Something which is coming from other parts of the world you don't even know. Okay. So I think even from the environment point of view, it would be better to increase production within the country because we require that coal.
All right. Thanks very much, Mr. Swarup, for joining us with that. Let me go back to Air Chief Marshal Fali Major. Air Chief, in terms of employment in the defence sector, indigenous defence sector, how would the announcements made today actually contribute greatly to that?
I think we'll have to wait and see, because all these things were in the offing and discussed for many, many years, but nothing was put into place. But now that this decision has been taken, and once things kick off after this COVID catastrophe, I'm quite sure that it'll give a huge employment opportunity to our technocrats and to our young scientists and others, including, I would say, even the startups who have got a huge talent and skill levels to manufacture most of the things within the country.
Okay. Joining us now, Dr. Subba Rao, Chairman and Managing Director of Anand's Technologies and the co-chair of the FICCI Space Committee. Sir, lots of announcements as far as space is concerned. How important is the announcement as far as private operators participating along with ISRO and having the opportunity of using ISRO's facilities?
Good. Thank you very much. And we must thank the government, particularly the finance minister. She did a great job today as far as the space is concerned. What I mean is, the space as a whole in this country does not have a defined policy for the private sector, except the fact that they use the private sector to do some of their jobs. Instead, when you look at something like Washington space policy or European space policy, we understand that every country has a different space policy wherein the private enterprise participates, survives, and thrives. That type of arrangement has not been there all along. Now we are glad that today the policy announcement has been made wherein she wants to create a level playing field between the government, which means ISRO today, and the private enterprises like us, like very many. So we're glad that that kind of a level playing field is being set up today. At the same time, and there's a policy that's going to be in the offing, like a predictive policy, where a great amount of investments can come from private sector into this area. So that policy has been absent all along. We're glad that it's coming up today. So that way, the entire country, which has been dependent upon the space, which provides a lot of SMEs, a lot of industries that have been there, they're providing a lot of employment in this area, they will thrive on their own now. On the process, they're also creating a regulatory mechanism in this. Like telecommunications have a regulatory mechanism, and every other sector has a regulatory mechanism in this country. But in space, there is no regulatory mechanism as such. Once the level playing field is coming into the offing, then automatically the regulatory environment becomes a must, and that keeps up the industry in good stead. And of course, the huge
one moment, I just want to go back. I want to just go across now to Amandeep Singh. He's the head of defense at Ashok Leyland. Mr. Singh, would you say that the decision to restrict imports in certain categories, and we don't know what those categories are, is a recognition by the government, some would say belatedly, of a certain maturity in developing technology of a certain quality within India, that we don't necessarily have to import what we make in India is good enough?
Yeah, absolutely right. I think the steps announced by the Honorable Finance Minister today are really path-breaking as far as defense production and self-reliance in India is concerned. I think this has been a lot of it has been a wish list from the defense industry in India, including the SIDM, which is the Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers. We have been following up with the government earlier, with the finance minister. She was the defense minister earlier. So notifying a specific list of weapons and platforms, I think will go a long way in developing the technology in India, know-how in India. And also, if you see, one of the very important aspects which has been mentioned today is setting of realistic GSQRs. I think this will go a long way.
You're talking about staff qualitative requirements, yes.
Yes, general staff qualitative requirements, which will go a long way in letting Indian industry develop, because you have to start somewhere, right? If you go to foreign OEMs today, they were initially patronized by their countries to go in for local manufacturing, and I think this is a very big step that has been taken today.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank all of our panelists very much for joining us today. Important announcements which have been announced. Sectorally, they are critical, of course. But I think the larger issue of what this was supposed to be a part of remains unanswered. This was all supposed to be a part of a COVID relief package. That's not really been dealt with today. Nonetheless, important announcements. We'll leave it there.